Hi, this is the Wasatch Taxpayers Association. I'm Tracy Taylor. We are doing candidate interviews for the school board election this year. There's 3 seats that are up on a 5-member board, so it's a really crucial election. And also for any of you that have been very concerned about your property taxes in the last few years, the Wasatch School District actually has 70% of our property taxes every year. So it's a very important election. All the information we talk about today can be found on our website, wasatchtaxpayersassociation.com. So today we have Marianne Allen. She's running in the
County South seat.
Okay, which is G.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an incumbent. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run again.
Yeah. So I'm Marianne Allen, and a little bit about me. I've lived here a little over 10 years now. I'm a mother of 3 kids. I used to be a teacher and a coach in Heber County school districts, and I've always been very involved in education. I was raised by educators, and I was also raised to be very civically minded and to contribute to my community. I was asked to run last time, and this is the conclusion of my first term, and I feel like we've made some good progress, and I'm seeking a re-election to continue that good progress.
Great. One of the questions we're asking everybody is, who do you feel you answer to?
As school board members, it's dictated in state law, and I follow that, and I firmly believe it personally. 53G 4401, if anybody's watching and knows the code, and that is school board members are responsible to the constituents that they represent. And so I have firmly tried to adhere to that, especially in my votes, and represent my constituents, especially when they are taking the time to come to me and talk to me about their concerns. That actually means a lot.
Yeah, so let's talk about the most important vote that you've actually had to cast in the last couple of years, which is the tax increase of last year. You were the only no vote on that tax increase. You actually asked the school board to wait to, do some more research and mulling over of what the public had to say about it. There were hundreds of people that were at that school board meeting. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to vote no.
Yeah, and I guess one of my firm beliefs in representing people is that we have diverse opinions and backgrounds and perspectives, and I try to be inclusive of that and be very respectful of that. When we started talking about it, I had a lot of meetings on my own. I was trying to understand why we needed to hold the rate, and there was never a disagreement amongst the board on the levies that dealt with our teachers and directly impacting our students. The differing opinion that I had was the levies that dealt more with our capital and saving for the future, and there was a disagreement of whether we use it as a checking account and savings account. And there was a lot of understanding that I felt like came of having a differing opinion, but ultimately it came down to, we knew that the teachers and students either way were taken care of, and there was a disagreement on saving for the future, and I heard from a lot of people who said, as long as our teachers and kids are taken care of, I'm struggling. A lot of people are having to take on other jobs. I know I myself have 4 jobs because it is of value to me to stay here with my family. But hearing from people and saying, okay, let's go back, can we wait a little bit? And I felt like I voted the way my constituents wanted. I represent Wallsburg. Wallsburg was hit hard last year. They really were, with a lot of infrastructure needs that they need out there. And a lot of people were just saying, can you give a little? And so I voted that way. And the one thing about politics, obviously not everybody's going to have the same opinion, and it's okay.
Yeah, and we don't have to have 5 votes
together,
votes
and
on
it's
everything.
Okay. And so that was one time that I just felt like I needed to represent my constituents, and that was my job, and so I did.
Well, and I found out pretty much after the fact that capital fund that you voted on last year, which it'll be up on our website, you can go see the actual vote on our website. But it was to put money aside for the future in cash for elementary schools in the future. Or at least you're thinking that's the next school that needs to be built. But in my mind, that just circumvents the voters again, like the lease revenue bond did. It's circumventing the voters to be able to vote, to say, yes, we need a new school. I mean, that is what actually state legislature last winter had problems with, is school boards, you know, getting a no vote on something, and they go ahead, like the lease revenue bond, and go ahead and vote, you know, the 5 of you voting for it. So tell us a little bit more of your thoughts on the lease revenue bond and that capital fund now that is set aside, and it's a slush fund. I mean, make no mistake about it, there is no earmarking of that money you increased last year to put it towards that construction. It can be pretty much spent on anything.
Yeah, and I would hesitate calling it a slush fund because it also is what we get our bond ratings off of. It's being fiscally responsible, quite honestly, to keep enough on hand so that there is an emergency, we can take care of it. So it's just,
yeah, but those GO bonds that we
Yes.
vote on
So-
our ballot has
those.
wording of how you
Directly.
can spend that
I
money,
get that.
and this does not.
Capital funds are for the district needs.
Yeah.
Lease revenue, it's ironic, you and I both are involved legislatively, I'm at the state as well. I know it was Senate Bill 86 with lease revenue bonding. One of the things that's ironic about that is that schools can only bond 2 ways, and that's dictated by the state. Lease revenue bonds and GO bonds. So we at the time, and again, I go on the information presented to me at the time, and at the time the yield curve was inverted. So if I am presented as a board member with a scenario of lease revenue that could save us between 10 and 40 million dollars over the course of a whole loan, I would consider it fiscally irresponsible to not look at that and try and go that way.
Even though the public voted against that project specifically 4 years prior.
And I'll be honest with you, because I was honest about this up front. I was one that voted no because I didn't have my questions answered at the time. Being on the board, asking questions, getting answers to those, and seeing the need of the high school. And we went through the future schools process, and it came out of it that we needed it. I mean, the whole lease revenue history, the lease revenue history is you had a small community that needed a jail back in the 80s.
Right.
And it was a need.
And then somehow school boards and municipalities and everybody else jumped on that.
I know you disagree
Yeah.
with it, but the state legislature said that this is the way that school districts, when there is a need and the public is not willing to pass a GO on it, that was an avenue that we could use. And quite honestly, if you look at our public hearing on lease revenue bonds, Randy Larson came, and I feel like he, as a bond attorney, said it best that in reality, lease revenue bonding really puts the pressure on the 5 members of the school board, because we have to budget accordingly for a lease revenue bond. It is not secured by everyone's property taxes directly. Yes, obviously we still collect the money, but it is not secured by everyone's property taxes. It's secured by us, by our buildings. And so there's a little less risk, as Randy said, in that meeting. And we chose to do that way because it was a need that we have. And even this year, we're close to 2,700 kids in that high school. So we're underway on the second high school. I know lease revenue bonding is not the way that obviously everyone agrees on. At the time, it would have saved, the opportunity to save that much money was there, and I can't pass on.
Okay, so you're saying there's 2,700 high school kids in that school?
October 1st is tomorrow, is coming up.
Great.
So we'll get our official numbers.
And I want to see those right away.
Yep.
Because this school is actually bigger than the school we have. So with 2,700 students, you're dividing that now between 2 schools?
Yeah, so right now we are technically the largest 6A school in the state, but we have a waiver currently for 5A. And so we are going to split, and we'll see what the numbers are when we split and when we talk about boundaries.
Okay. How do you think that Future Schools Advisory Board, or whatever it was called, how do you think that process went? Because I sat on that board, I was at every meeting, and I also talked to a lot of people that were participating as well.
I will say that one thing that I ran on the first time, and one thing I continue to run on, is that I want to increase chances for transparency and for community involvement and getting feedback from our constituents. That is what I ran on, and that's what I feel like we have firmly moved forward in the last 4 years. The Future Schools project had never been done before, ever. I feel like...
Well, we devoted a lot of time
and I understand that.
Getting information.
And I understand that. And I know you were there. It's a process. Is it perfect? Nothing's ever going to be perfect how we do it. Was I actually, I was out with some medical issues at the time, so I was not there at every meeting. I cannot speak to every single meeting like I know you can. I could get the after.
Right.
But I felt like we had people in the room who had voted no, and that in itself I think was very important.
We wanted to talk about why that bond failed, and we were never allowed to do that, because every time we talked about that high school in the Northfields, we got shut down. They didn't want to talk about it because that Future Schools was supposed to be to master plan the district, okay? But what came out of that Future Schools recommendation? To build the very high school nobody could talk about during the process. In fact, if it wasn't for a few of us coming together on our own time to do an alternative master plan to save the taxpayers $100+ million by adding on to the existing high school that the school board promised at the time was going to happen, plus to build a magnet school next door from the old Timpanogos Junior High. Let's tear it down. Let's build a brand new 9th grade STEM school, whatever it needs to be. We're not afraid of spending money. It was more of just having options. If we wouldn't have done that, that was the only other option that came out of that process, was our alternative master plan and the high school that everybody voted down. So it felt very insincere from to start, because people knew that. And what was our master plan for when we build schools and the benchmarks and all that stuff we were supposed to discuss?
Let's get to, and I'm sorry you felt like that, and that's where we are not going to please everyone. The sheer fact that it even happened, that people who had voted no were included, that's a huge win in my mind, that it even happened.
Yeah, we showed up.
We do have a plan, a guideline to follow. Going back to the capital budget, just really quick, part of that plan was to be able to prepare for the future, so that it wasn't a, do we need this? It was a population-driven decision.
Right, and the other thing that was told to us a couple years ago during this Future Schools was that we were going to grow by 4,000 students in 5 years or whatever, and that is not happening. In fact, the enrollment has plateaued. In elementary schools has actually gone down in the last 5 years, and yet we are now building a 400,000 square foot high school compared to our 325 over here that we currently have. And the one thing our master plan had was separate areas, the main campus and then the magnet school, and we were demoted in the process because it was separate schools. And what are you building over in the Northfields right now? You're building a separate sports complex, the main, and then you have the tech school next door. That was exactly what we proposed in the other property. So all I'm saying is it's very hard for business owners in this community who are asked to step up and participate to not feel like they were heard. We tried to bring up the fact that Park City has not had enrollment increases in a decade because the property is so high. Nobody can afford it. So how do you weigh all these things that have ended up coming to fruition after that future schools?
So there was a lot in that, Tracy.
There was a
I'm
ton.
gonna try and address
There
as
was
much
a
as I
ton.
can.
And
I don't know how much time we have left.
And you
but
know why I did
let
that
me-
is because there's a lot of new people that barely moved into this community
That's
that
fair.
they
I get
don't
it.
know how we got to this spot. So,
And I'm saying there's a lot, so if I don't
Yep.
cover it, let me know. Enrollment, I can only speak for the last 4 years too. Obviously, I've only been on the board for 4 years. This is my first term. With the Future Schools project, again, always they say your best predictions are for a year, gets a little less, 3 years, 5 years you start, it's wonky, 7. So that is why we use Davis Demographics, which again, I know there's disagreements, but we have contracted with them because we want to dial down to the parcel in our county what we're seeing. So to address that, that's where we're at. As for plateauing, we have had COVID, we have had the economy, we have all those things, and we are still seeing people move in. Yes, we are seeing people move out, but we are seeing them move back in as well, and from other states. And they are not to the extent that we currently have, but they still have children. So yes, there's a plateau, but if you look at the projections, Washington County and Wasatch County school districts are still projected to plateau and grow. Now, as for us, I will use Midway Elementary as an example, just because I know there's 8 portables at Midway right now. So people say, oh, well, you don't need an elementary because you're plateauing. We also have 8 portables there. I know we have portables at J.R. Smith. We have all these portables, and we know that that's not necessarily the best scenario for these kids or the safest. I mean, you and I have been on the Hill. They just passed House Bill 84 last year about school safety. Wasatch, thankfully, is known for being one of the safest school districts in the state because we've taken those steps. But as for, and we will continue to take those steps as well. But as for demographic wise, plateaus still mean we're overcrowded in a lot of these schools.
well, and so let's talk about that a minute, because the elementary schools, some are full, some are not. So we're going to have to redistrict. But the preschool, pre-K is in there, okay? So to have to build a whole new elementary school to, for 25, 30 million, I don't know what it costs now, 25 million?
No,
20?
new elementary schools are being bid out in the $40 and $50 million range.
Because we're putting the pre-K in the elementary schools. Is that the most fiscally conservative way to take care of these kids? And are the taxpayers aware that that happened? I don't recall ever a vote happening or any public hearings on whether we should pay for pre-K. Not that we shouldn't.
Okay.
I'm just saying that when you're putting those pre-K kids in those elementary schools, maybe there's a better, cheaper facility that we could have all the pre-K in that would not cost $40 million to build.
And those are things we can, I mean, there are options out there, but realize from the state, when the state says, hey, we want every single school district has to provide for pre-K, and they also have to provide for full-day kindergarten. Every time the state legislature meets, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but when you have 136 education bills in one session, and the last 3 years have been over 100 education bills every single year, these are the adjustments that school districts have to make. And
let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes.
So you sit on the school board, but
Yes.
you also have other committees that you sit on outside of the school board. Tell
Yeah.
folks a little bit about that.
So on Wasatch County School District School Board, we all have committee assignments. Mine are a couple of, off the top of my head, I know interlocal meetings, that's one of my responsibilities. Obviously the cities I serve, and then also the policy committee and MIDA, and so I have those. I also serve on the board of directors for the Utah School Boards Association. I'm on their executive committee, so the leadership committee as well, and then I chair the master board certification which is actually a training program for school board members throughout all 41 districts in the state. And then I am the voting member on Joint Legislative Committee.
Okay.
So I have the vote for Wasatch, North Summit, South Summit. and
So you
City.
bring a lot of information back
Yeah.
from the state to our local school
Yes.
district. Also, really quickly, I want to ask you about the Heber CRA.
Yes.
I've gotten many phone calls about this from taxpayers in our community who live outside of Heber. They're in Wasatch County proper, and they don't want their tax money for the school district to be funneled over to Heber City so they can redevelop Main Street. Tell us how you feel about it, and that vote's going to be coming up here in the
It's
next
coming.
6 months.
It's definitely coming. I don't even think we have 6 months. I know the city is wanting to meet with the school board again quickly. With the CRA, until I see the final conditions of the agreement that they are offering, I cannot say one way or the other, I'll be honest, because part of my responsibilities at the state, I have relationships with legislators that I've developed. There are conversations being had, and quite honestly, I have to balance that. And do I want to represent my local constituents? Yes. Do I want to hear from them? Yes. Do I also need to be aware of situations that might arise that I don't want a school district being forced to commit to a CRA? And if that's what's coming, I want to be able to have conditions that are set forth by our school district. And because, I mean, it's
Well,
the
that's-
lesser of two evils. I
Yeah,
get
but
it.
there's
It's the
no way
lesser
to
of two evils.
guarantee that whatever the state
Exactly.
does doesn't
It's the
preempt whatever you guys decided anyway. So
But
in our
until I see
mind,
final conditions,
Absolutely.
I cannot say, because if anybody's watched the CRA discussions, I've asked to be on the advisory board, I've asked to be on the voting board of the CRA as school board members, not
Right.
just me, but as school board members, because that would be important to me.
Okay.
And conditions.
Yep.
I mean, that's what it's gonna come down to.
so we'll keep an eye on that in the
Yeah.
next few months.
Yes.
Tell the folks why they should vote for you, and then also contact information
Yes.
on where they can meet you.
Yes, so honestly, I am a former AP government teacher, so voting is very important to me. Educate yourself, get information, contact me anytime. It's marianneballen.org, 385-240-0297. I am open at any time for discussion, for questions. Contact me on Facebook. My priorities will always be to balance the needs of our students, our kids, and our teachers, and achieving high academic excellence with the fiscal and transparency needs of our community.
Great. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And go to our website, wasatchtaxpayersassociation.com, for all the information we discussed. Thanks.